Hi, Lucy here, filming a video about how to help novs improve. I think being a pro-am team is a really valuable experience, normally for the pro and the am. I've made really wonderful friendships that way. I've learned a lot as a debater that way, and it's been such fulfilling and rewarding experiences for me. So I'm so excited that you will get to do that at Easter's, and I hope it's a really amazing and wonderful experience. I'm going to split this video into 3 parts. So firstly, I'm going to talk about before the tournament, then during the tournament, and then after the tournament. So for before the tournament, I have 3 tips. The first tip is that before you get started with practices or jumping straight into talking about who's going to do what or any of those things, it's often really helpful to sit down and have a proper chat with your nov about how this is going to work, what's going to be most beneficial for you. There's a couple of things that's important with that. The first one is that obviously everyone has different levels of commitment for what they're going into. They have different things that are coming up in their lives. They, might have a particular week that's really busy for them, or they might be feeling overwhelmed about the quantity of practices before a tournament, and being able to have a conversation about that is really good for you. I think you should do that in any team, but particularly in a pro-am team, I think it's really important because if it's their first tournament or one of their first tournaments, they might not know what that process is like. They might be thinking that they have to do a massive amount of commitment, and actually it's not what they thought, or they might not be aware that there's a commitment involved, and that's something that's also really beneficial to talk about. The other thing that can be really good with a talk before you start doing practices or anything like that is that everyone takes on feedback slightly differently, and it's really helpful to talk about the ways that feedback is received and imparted in a way that's beneficial. For example, some people are really sensitive about feedback, and they prefer a little bit of feedback at a time. They prefer not being overwhelmed by lots and lots of feedback. Some people want it all. They want all of the feedback all the time. And neither of those ways are wrong. They're just ways that's really helpful to talk about in advance. As well, some people really need lots of positive affirmations and, positive feedback, and some people find that patronizing. They don't really care about that. And so lots of people have those perspectives, and talking about those can be really valuable because it means that firstly, your feedback is more efficient and actually does what it's supposed to do because someone's not shutting off, for example, or you're giving the correct quantity, or you're giving it at the right times. But secondly, it means that you're not likely to get upset if, for example, you feel like someone's being standoffish or not taking on your feedback and they're actually just overwhelmed in the moment. So it really helps create a good relationship between you and the person you're giving feedback to. Obviously as well, I think it's something that you can revisit as the trainings go on. Like I talked about, it might be someone's first experience preparing for a tournament, and they might not be prepared for feeling sad when they lose a debate, for example, or those kind of emotions. It can be something that they've not really dealt with before. So I think being aware of that in advance is something that's really helpful and important for you to think about as well. My second piece of advice is that I think in the preparation for a tournament, especially when you're doing a pro-am team, it's time for you to really think about what the point of practice debates are. I find this really hard, but sometimes you just have to put your ego aside in a way. So for example, I think that every time I do a practice debate, I get really stressed out about thinking that we need to win the debate. But actually, the point of it is to learn, and the point of it is to, get better as a team and develop as a team. And that's the thing that you should always have at the front of your mind when you're doing a practice. What I think that practically looks like is things like in the prep room, taking more time to explain a point, even though you think you want to move on, to make sure that you have the right amount of time. Talking more about other people's opinions and getting more ideas and discussing them more to maybe be able to make sure that your nov feels like they're being listened to and understood. And you might actually, obviously, they'll also have really amazing things to contribute probably as well. In a debate, it might look like, well, the thing that we think they need to work on is structure. And so we're just going to work on your structure, and maybe you're going to give a worse speech as a result of that, but that's totally fine. And having those discussions beforehand. All of those kind of things are really valuable, and it's important to have that discussion in advance so that you know and that you're thinking about that, because otherwise in the moment it can feel quite frustrating when you feel like, I have to trade off being good in this debate in order to make sure that I'm working towards my goals. Obviously, that's something that I think is also applicable to any debate, but is particularly important for pro-am when you're trying to help people learn, and that is your entire function and goal, especially in the lead up to a tournament. That's something that's really important to keep in mind. The third tip that I have is I think people often think about the wealth of knowledge that they have about debating, and so they know lots of terms and they've done lots of motions. The other thing that you have, which is extremely valuable as a debater, is that you know lots of other debaters. And what I think is really good about that is, for example, when your Nov has a particular issue that they might be working on, one thing that's really valuable is trying to get them to maybe talk to someone else who you know has had that issue in the past, or watch speeches of people who have the particular style that they have so that they can see how they can make their style better. And you have access to all that kind of institutional knowledge that I think people often forget about and don't realize is as important. So I think referring people around and helping them find the people that are really beneficial are great. So for example, when I work with Novs who are women, I always try to send them lots of videos, if they want videos, of other women speaking, and I think of the ones that have the particular style that I think they use and that they would want to use, because sometimes you haven't seen that before and you have that knowledge and that understanding that your Nov maybe doesn't have because they've only seen a particular kind of debating before maybe, or they've never debated before even. So I think having that knowledge is also really valuable. Okay, second part then is about during the tournament itself. Obviously, your focus will switch at this point in the tournament until you're trying to do well, because obviously both of you want, all three of you want to do well in that situation. I think one thing that is often overlooked is that it's not just about teaching your Nov about the debating, it's also about how a tournament works and functions, because debating and tournaments are quite alien places. We use a bunch of vocabulary that people don't understand. There's rules around breaking and how to break and what kind of rounds there are and what kind of feedback we're giving to adjudicators and who adjudicators are, and all of this information that is often quite difficult to understand. So I think making sure that you're explaining that to your novice as well is extremely helpful, because it makes it way less stressful for them, and it means they're more likely to do well in the tournament because they understand what's going on, they know what's happening when they're coming in, they know what they need to do. That's extremely helpful for them as well. The second thing is that I think you need to make sure that you are talking with them about your stress and where your stress comes from. Obviously, debating tournaments are really stressful places. People often have lots of emotions associated with them. And one thing that I think is really important is making clear that your emotions, so for example, if you're sad when you've lost, that's not actually connected to them, and that's a group thing that the team can go through together, because it's really easy to internalize that when you know you're the novice on the team, to internalize and think that you're the reason that the team has lost or that you didn't do well enough. And that's where that stuff about talking about feedback earlier comes in as well, right? Because that's also tied up in those emotions. It's really helpful to talk about that beforehand. That's my second tip about during the tournament. My third tip is to make sure that you're still having fun, which is kind of a basic one, but I think that making sure that you and your team have like rituals that you enjoy can be really helpful for team bonding. Have a team song, have a team joke, have something that makes it really enjoyable and fun, and make sure that you're still making sure that they have a good time, because the hope is that they come back and keep doing debating and keep having an awesome time. That's really important as well. And then my third part of the video is for after the tournament finishes, and that's just a quick note to say that try to keep those relationships going afterwards. It's really rewarding and valuable to have kind of an ongoing mentor-mentee relationship with the people that have been your novices. I think that's really valuable. Keeping on checking in with them, making sure that they feel supported, for example, introducing them to other people that they could speak with in the future. All of those things mean that you're going to have an ongoing and really amazing, rewarding, valuable relationship. So I really recommend keeping that going even after the tournament is concluded. Thanks so much, everybody, and I hope you have an amazing time at Easters.